Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our December 3rd, 2020 Housing Commission meeting. Our last one of this. Give me one moment. I'm getting some feedback here. For the safety of our staff and residents, we're holding a virtual meeting this evening. We're legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the county board's continuity of operations ordinance adopted in March 2020. I know a lot of you have gone through this with me several times, but for those who have not, and for the sake of our audience, we need to cover a few specifics about virtual meetings. Tonight's meeting will be available to stream from the county website. Will be on YouTube within a few days, but it is available for folks who've logged in through Microsoft Teams. Audio of today's meeting is also available by phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect by phone. For those joining through Microsoft Teams, keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Please turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located on your meeting command bar, which is the center bar on Teams here below. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you, and if you're dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute. Commissioners, if you wish to be recognized to speak, please raise your hand using the raise your hand kind of icon. And if you don't have that, then you can just kind of visually raise your hand or just kind of give me a verbal cue. As we always do, we'll figure it out. I don't believe we have any public speakers tonight, so we don't need to go through all of that. But please know that pre-registration for tonight's Housing Commission meeting was required. That was put on our website along with the time at which registration needed to be completed by. We are unable to accommodate additional speakers and don't permit in-person or registration right now. The meeting chat is active only for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance. That's it. No comments about the topics, no questions, no substantive issues. We are subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. So the record for the meeting here needs to be reflected in the video. So things that are in the chat are going to have to be read aloud if they are substantive. So only use it if you're having technical issues with Microsoft Teams. All voting will be taken via roll call. And lastly, as I say every time we have one of these virtual meetings, tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Okay, excellent. So the first item on the agenda is public comment on items not on the agenda. And Joel, I believe we have no public comment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. Okay. Before we move to the second agenda item, which is the approval of notes, I just want to recognize, I called him out the last meeting. He's official now, officially member of the Housing Commission. Just again, would like to extend a warm welcome to Mike Heminger. I believe is it Heminger or Heminger? Heminger. Mike, who's our latest, possibly greatest, we'll see, member of the Citizens Advisory Commission on Housing. So Mike, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is going to be approval of notes. A copy of our November Housing Commission meeting. A copy of the notes was sent around to commissioners beforehand. Are there any amendments or revisions that folks would like to make to the notes before we entertain a motion to approve the notes? Go ahead, Karen.
I saw that Holly had made a comment during the meeting, and I don't think she was listed as one of the participants at the meeting. Like I don't know if she showed up as actually being at the meeting.
I would have to go. Let's see here.
And I was at that meeting.
That's right. So you are listed as not having been there. So Joel, do you mind just making that note?
Yes, I will add that. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll just consider that as as basically a motion to well, we don't really follow Robert's rules here, so we'll add Holly's name to the draft notes that we approve. Thanks for catching that, Karen. Anything else? So I will go ahead and motion that we approve the notes with the amendment that we add Holly's name to indicate that she would be present. Is there a second to my motion?
I'll make a second.
Evelyn.
Oh.
Second.
All right, I heard several. That counts. Excellent. So, like I said, I'm gonna have to do a roll call. Let me pull up the roster here. Excellent. Okay. So I'm gonna go line by line with each commissioner and indicate whether you'd like to vote yes, no, or to abstain. Commissioner Arthur?
Aye.
So that's a yay, yes?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Commissioner Berkey, yes. Commissioner Bray?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner G? Yep.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Heminger?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan?
Yes.
Commissioner Montgomery? Okay, not present. Commissioner Norris?
Yes.
Commissioner Rubalcaba?
Yes.
Commissioner Surface?
Yes.
And Commissioner Sims? Okay, so I think that's 11 in favor, none against, none abstaining. Okay, great. So on to the next item of our agenda, which is an action item, which I don't believe we've heard really in any form before, correct me if I'm wrong though, which is the changes to the, was it the RPP, the Residential Permit Parking Program. And like I said, that's an action item, and I will turn that over to county staff.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Krim, and I'm the county parking manager. So thank you for making time for us on your agenda this evening. And I am here to discuss with you some proposed changes to the residential permit parking program. We're going to the board to authorize advertisement of another public hearing on this at our meeting in December. And tonight, I want to make sure that you're familiar with the proposed changes, the process by which we got to them. And then I'd like to have your vote to advise the board to authorize advertisement with any changes you would want to see to a proposed program before adoption. First, this gives you a recap of how we got to this proposed program. This image gives a path of what it took to get here, and I'll highlight some of the elements of our public engagement. In 2018, we received about 1,600 responses to general questions about parking in residential areas through an online comment form and in-person events. And then we used those responses to structure 3 public forums where we heard from about 200 residents about what works and doesn't work about the program. Based on that, we crafted and fielded a household survey that went out by mail to 60,000 households, including all of the households that are in RPP zones. And from that, we got about 4,500, 4,600 responses. And amidst all this engagement, we collected parking occupancy data in 4 different areas of the county on streets with RPP and streets without. We intended to hold 3 deliberative dialogues around a proposed policy in the spring. COVID-19 interrupted those plans. And we decided that it would not be possible to get a representative group of residents together virtually for that kind of event. And so we decided to not go forward with those. Instead, in September, we published a project update or app and notified civic associations, as well as our project email list, that a proposed program would be coming in October. And we released that proposed program with a set of videos, an FAQ, and hosted a live Q&A session with staff. And since mid-October, we've received feedback on the proposed program through an online questionnaire, a call-in telephone line, and through calls and emails that have come to us directly. And most responses have been from those who live in RPP zones as well. Most have been people who live in lower density, single family detached housing. And they're mostly from people who have, or the people who have responded to us have generally had more vehicles than the county as a whole, which isn't surprising because these are, of course, the residents who are probably likely to have the greatest interest in the program. In order to be inclusive, we've offered all of our materials in English. And so here's a brief bit about what we have found. So first and foremost, the public expects parking to be easy. In our engagement and other interactions with the public, it's clear that many residents want to be able to park in front of their homes, though our policies do not promise to make that possible in all situations. In our survey, people generally thought parking was difficult and wanted to have RPP when streets were only about half full in the evening, which is below the policy targets for occupancy that we have in our residential permit parking program, or in the master transportation plan, I should say. Thank you. So we did find that the RPP program makes parking easy, even in the hours after the restrictions end. So most streets with RPP where we conducted parking counts are, no more than half full during a weekday. And then we found that fewer than 20% of streets that we studied were ever more than 75% occupied. And 75% is the threshold that you need to get RPP restrictions in the first place. Also, people who live in RPP zones generally say that they have an easier time parking than those who don't live in a zone. And while RPP is an on-street parking program, the amount of parking that residents have in driveways, garages, and parking lots comes up a lot when we talk about the program. And so we went about investigating how much off-street parking is actually out there. And as you might expect, we found a lot of variation, but single-family detached homes had a median of about 3.5 parking spaces per home. Townhomes and duplexes had a median of about 2, and apartments and condos had a median of 1.1 spaces per unit. We also found that most people who like RPP or who have RPP like it and want to keep it, whereas most of the people who don't have RPP don't want it. And many of those who don't want it also don't think that the program should exist. And when we look at what we've heard from across the community, both those who have RPP and those who don't, we see lots of different opinions about how the program should function going forward. And what we're proposing here is meant to be a compromise between these different viewpoints. And it follows from a set of policy-making principles that we presented to the board in the fall of 2019. But we recognize that all outcomes of this process will displease some of our residents. With that all in mind, I'm now going to go into the areas of the program and what we've proposed, which are organized around the 6 major themes that you see here. In the proposed program, staff would reaffirm that RPP is in place to manage parking demand only, and that influences the draft intent language that you'd find in the attachment B of the draft board report that we provided for you in advance of the meeting today. As you see here, some residents who live in RPP zones or who want RPP restrictions want restrictions to reduce litter or noise associated with people parking on the street. But we want to clarify that the program is only intended to manage parking since there's no comprehensive plan guidance for the use of RPP for reasons other than parking availability. And while the code refers to issues like litter, air pollution, and others in the intent language currently, the program is only granted on the basis of parking availability. In the feedback that we've received since October, this was the part that had the most support from the people we heard from, and 45 out of the 91 people that answered questions about this part of the proposal agreed. Those who didn't agree wanted a clearer statement that the program is meant to manage commuter parking only. And then the next program element is eligibility to petition for restrictions. So today, nearly all single-family detached households are able to apply for and get restrictions. Meanwhile, there's a series of tests that a building has to meet in order to become eligible if it's a duplex, townhome, or multifamily building. In our proposed program, all housing types would be eligible, but people living in buildings built by site plan, unified residential development, unified commercial mixed-use development, and the two types of form-based code use permits would still be ineligible to apply. Now, many residents have strong opinions about who should and should not be able to petition for RPP. It's fundamentally an issue about fairness for many. About half of those who currently participate by permits or buy permits think everyone should be able to get permits. But what we're proposing is meant to address fairness issues in a balanced way. And certainly some residents will see excluding households who reside in homes built through site plan or use permit as unfair, but this is meant to do two things. It prevents developers from building housing with a reduced number of parking spaces and then expecting county streets to store the rest. And excluding these buildings is also necessary to reduce resident opposition to much needed new housing construction. And we think it's important to note that when we surveyed residents, about half of all residents support new, denser housing construction in their neighborhoods, but only a quarter of those residents support that new housing if the hypothetical new residents are able to park on the street. In what we've heard since October, some still believe that multifamily residents should not be eligible to petition for the program, while others don't think the program should exist or that the program should be open to all residents, regardless of housing type or use permit or entitlement strategy. Those who agree with the proposal said they thought that it was fair, or at least no less fair than the current policy. And now let me talk a minute about proposed permits and pass caps, or the number of permits and passes that a household can obtain. So under the proposed program, the maximum number of permits available to a given household would depend on whether or not that household has parking in a driveway, garage, or parking lot. So households with no off-street parking would be able to get up to 3 permits. Households with any off-street parking could get 2. And the Flex Pass would be included in these permit totals. So a house with a driveway would be either able to get 2 vehicle-specific permits or 1 Flex Pass and a decal each year. In order to understand how we came to this proposal, I'll remind you of the relationship that people make between off-street parking and on-street parking. Some people say that those living in apartments and condo buildings should only park in the garages and parking lots built with the building, whereas others think that those who live in single-family homes with driveways and garages should not have access to RPP either. This proposal is meant as a compromise between these two differing points of view, and where we link the maximum number of permits to the amount of to the presence of off-street parking at the household. And this proposal is meant to manage parking demand from residents. Residents who live in RPP zones are actually more likely to park on street than those who do not have RPP. The proposal manages the number of cars that might park on street if new households join the RPP program under the expanded eligibility rules as well. And those who disagree with this part of the proposal see it as unfair because they believe that it is unfair to those with off-street parking or to those who use parking for something else. And others say that it would be a hardship for households with multiple adults who will perhaps have more cars than a household will have. Others, though, see this as more fair than the current program in terms of how many passes are available to participants. Now let me talk for a second about visitors and how those are accommodated under the program. So the current Flex Pass and short-term visitor passes would remain, as would the pass that's given for landlords. temporary permits that are given for contractors, and good and all zones permits that are given to people who provide social or health services in homes around the county as part of like a routine part of their work. We would expand the program to allow the employees of, and this is specifically group home staff, when those group homes are located in RPP zones, they would be able to get permits, as would a limited number of staff at elementary, high, and middle schools. Giving permits to a limited number of staff at each school would allow schools to keep green space green instead of building parking on it. The proposed program would also allow anyone without a pass or permit to pay for parking on RPP restricted streets for 2 hours, up to 2 hours, while the restrictions act, as is common in other jurisdictions with residential permit parking. No parking meters would be installed, and again, anybody with a pass or permit wouldn't pay this fee on top of it. Making the parking paid is intended to make the enforcement easier. The rate would be the same as the county's other short-term parking spaces, and people would pay either using their phone or with an Easy Park device that can be purchased through the county treasurer. Enforcement of the time limit is actually easier with Park Mobile than it is with meters, because while someone could go out and feed a meter, Park Mobile prevents you from doing that. However, the less frequently used Easy Park devices do allow you to feed the meter in violation of the time limit. In our early engagement, there was some openness to loosening restrictions for non-residents, but residents who already live in RPP zones were less supportive of that than those who don't live in RPP zones. And acceptance for non-residents parking on RPP restricted streets depended on the people about which we were talking. So service providers, landlords, and property managers, there was more support for them being able to park on RPP restricted streets, followed by school staff and teachers, with business patrons finding the least support in terms of people being able to park on RPP restricted streets. In the feedback that we've received since October, most of the negative response has been about the 2-hour paid parking option. Most believe that the time limit won't be enforced and that people will be able to park all day. And some did mention opposition to teacher permits, saying that that would also make it parking difficult to find. In terms of support, some did say that there's agreement that this would make for more efficient use of public space. Now I'll just move on to permit and pass fees. Today, about 60% of the program is funded by permits and pass fees, with 40% coming from general taxes. Staff are proposing that fees cover the cost of providing the program, given that it's a voluntary program and since it excludes some people from using a public resource. And for the first year, the prices would be set as shown. Though the Flex Pass and First Book of Short-Term Visitor Passes would no longer be free of charge, there would be a 50% discount for eligible low-income households. In the first 2 years, increased revenue would offset the cost for upgrades to the software that we use to manage the program. And costs would be looked at every year, every few years, with the ability to change the rates up or down, depending on what it actually costs to deliver the program. In our engagement on this topic, residents were more likely to prefer a permit cap over pricing to manage demand, which is why you don't really see like an attempted demand-based pricing for the permits here. We did see, though, that low-income residents were, said that they were more permits should be to pay. Others think that RPP should be free, and to cover the cost of the program, that should be covered by general taxes. In the feedback that we've heard since October, many were opposed to the increase. And some believe that we should use parking ticket revenue to help defray some of the cost of the program, which is actually not part of what we're proposing here. The cost would be covered by the fees, not the ticket revenue. Others have shown support, though, for the idea that the program should be paid for entirely out of fees. Finally, I want to go over a set of administrative rule changes in the proposed program. So today, when a household petitions for restrictions, 60% of the households on the block must agree or support the restrictions. Then staff must find that more than 75% of the parking spots on the block are occupied. And then furthermore, staff must find that more than 25% of those spaces are occupied by vehicles that are from outside the zone in order for restrictions to be granted. In the proposed program, 80% of households would need to sign a petition for restrictions, either entirely new restrictions or an extension of restrictions, like changing hours. The proposed program would remove the out of area test because the vehicle registration sources that we have for this are flawed for the purposes of determining whether something is an out of area vehicle. So with the 25% out of area test removed, staff proposed that the threshold for occupancy be moved to 85% instead of 75%. In our prior engagement on this, we didn't ask direct questions about the petition process, though we did from time to time hear people say that they wanted us to remove the out of area test. We also did hear that some residents wanted some way for staff to review existing restrictions every so often without a resident petition. In the engagement we've gotten since October, some have said that the 85% threshold is too high and have continued to push for some sort of staff-led review of restrictions. Others have said that the process for making zones that are like too big, smaller, that's too difficult. Though others have supported removing the out of area test from the program. For the sake of time, these are some other administrative changes that I'm just going to show you here, and I'm happy to follow up on them in greater detail after after we move to question and answer. But before I close, this is our upcoming commission and board presentation schedule. We've met with 2 commissions already, but this shows our calendar before we hope to have an adopted new program at the January board meeting. And we look forward to your questions. We know that the program and our proposal are controversial, but we look to get your input on the proposed program and get your support for advertising in December. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Much appreciated. And since we hadn't really gotten like a robust, and I'm not blaming you, but given with the Housing Commission, we're not the Transportation Commission, certainly appreciate that robust overview. So I'm sure we have questions. So but before we go there, Joel, just to confirm, we have no public comment on this agenda item, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, we'll go straight to commission kind of comments and questions. So folks who have those, feel free to raise your hand, or if you don't have that function, just let me know and we'll go from there. I certainly have some, but I'm going to defer to my colleagues first.
This is Doris. Also, I'd like to have.
You can just go ahead. You can go ahead, Doris.
Okay. And I have a couple of questions. This I understand is the same permitting program, I think, for single-family housing, right? When a person has a disability and needs to park an accessible vehicle on the street, perhaps it doesn't fit into the garage on the lot or whatever. Yes? Is that the case?
Stephen, you're muted.
Thank you. No, Ms. Wright, this is actually a different program. This is not the program to reserve on-street spaces for people with disabilities. That would not be changed by this proposal.
Okay, but I heard also that you did say something about group home personnel and or healthcare personnel, right?
Correct.
Okay, so in the definition, does that include personal assistance?
I would have to get, well, what we had envisioned as it was home health aides.
Yeah. Okay.
But you know, I welcome for more like,
Yeah.
you know, I think
would-
working on
I
some of
would-
the definitions of this would be helpful. So if you want to tell me more about what some of the differences are, I'd be glad to hear it.
Many people whose incomes are seniors and persons with disabilities whose incomes are beyond Medicaid level, they may use a home health care agency, but they frequently, a lot of people, particularly here in Arlington, are paying fee for service directly to a personal assistant. And I do know some people who are living in single-family homes, for example, in residential neighborhoods. So I'm thinking that, and like to recommend that the language include the phrase consumer directed, which means employer hired, trained, and managed. Consumer directed personal assistance.
Okay, thank you. That's
Thank
helpful.
you for doing that. And so for that kind of thing, is there a fee or a charge? And if you're having a home health care aide or a personal assistant because of your disability, no matter your age, coming to your house and you need that space, is there, number one, a fee for that, and number two, do you still have to do the petition business? Because I think if it's for your disability, a policy that would require petitioning the neighbors doesn't seem fair and might actually be discriminatory under the Fair Housing Act and the ADA.
Right. So again, for the disabled, to reserve a space for people with disabled placards, there is no petition process, and we're not changing that.
I know. I heard
our
that. I'm saying for their
Oh.
assistants, though. Yeah. For the
Right.
home
No,
health care aide or the assistant, it I don't think it should have.
Right. No. So there wouldn't be it wouldn't be based on a petition. That, I mean, what we would be saying is like we're making a proposed change to the program so that if you already have the restrictions, any person that falls into these categories would automatically be able to get a permit. Though under our proposal, all permits would have a fee.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Doris. Others with questions? Go ahead, Karen. Karen and then Alice. Yep, go ahead.
So my question is, when you do these surveys on the street to see the number of cars that are occupying the street, when are these surveys done? Are they done like periodically through this year, or are they just like a point in time survey?
Yeah, so this is actually a really good question. What we've usually done is done these surveys like at some point during the hours of restriction that are being requested. But the number of surveys in the past have been basically just like a minimum of 2 over the span of maybe a few weeks. It's basically been based on when staff have been able to get out there. We are trying to figure out a way in which we could make some like survey or occupancy surveying that's like a little more, how should I say it, that has more data points than that. We're not quite sure what that would look like, but we want to have at least more instances of occupancy studies before giving out restrictions as we move forward.
My question is because I live on a street that's not, it's the first street that's not zoned basically. And so we get all the overflow, and we only get it in the summertime because that's when there's all these interns that are coming, because I live near Clarendon, that are coming. And so like if you came out and looked at our street right now, it's fine. But like last summer, there was no parking. So it's just like, so I was always wondering how these surveys were done and how they could be more sort of scientific.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, we're still investigating a way to make a more robust process that doesn't break the bank, but gives us a better sense of what occupancy really is on a longer time span.
If that was it, Karen, go ahead, Alice.
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation. I wondered, I believe there was a working group or something that assisted with this, right? Or is it a staff generated proposal?
No, there was not a working group.
Oh, okay. Somehow I thought there was. So that was one question. I wondered also, just more generally, to give us a sense, like, what problem were you looking to solve with this proposal?
Yeah. So the most immediate set of things that precipitated the study was the fact that we got like a lot of petitions in the years right before, well, in the preceding years, we had been getting a lot of petitions that were not passing, which said to us that residents like wanted RPP restrictions for reasons that didn't match the way the program was set up at the time. And so we decided to then just look at that, but then look at the whole program from start to finish, because it hadn't really been reviewed in 15 years at that point.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of follow-ups. One of the public comment forms that was shared with us asked a question about COVID, and that seemed reasonable. I feel like I should put on my screen so you can see me. Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. And I wondered about COVID too in two, I guess it comes together. First of all, if it did go through, when would the price increases occur? Because of this COVID question, I'm thinking, A, a lot of people are strapped for money right now, so it's not a great time for anything to increase. And then B, because of COVID and the changes in commuting patterns, and we don't really know what it's going to look like on the other side of COVID, I'm wondering if this is something that would be worth pausing on until like another year goes by, because so many things could potentially change between now and a year from now, let's say, that would give you more information about if or not many changes happen, and also financially people would be more hopefully on their feet. So I just wondered your thoughts on those.
Yeah, sure. So obviously COVID changed a lot of things after this process was already underway. I'll answer your question about the fees first. First of all, if the board were to adopt this proposed program, the fees would go into effect for the new program year. So basically, when people start buying permits in April for the coming program year, like starting in July, that's when the new fees would take effect. I understand what you're saying in terms of ability to pay. I think the other side of it is obviously we're in a budget situation where the ability to pay for programs is certainly a question and a concern. And so, I mean, perhaps, I think it's really kind of at this point, it's above my decision making as to whether or not to delay this fee change when, it's more about a fundamental question of whether general taxes should be paying for this program. The next thing in terms of commuting patterns, that's a very important question. And I think the question for us, where that really hits us, first of all, is we're wondering when we would start, when it would be appropriate to start doing surveys of occupancy again, for the reasons that you mentioned, because it's like, should we be granting restrictions based on the occupancy that we see these days or not? In terms, though, of pausing the review until this is over, that's something that we considered, but we decided to move forward based on the fact that there are people who want the moratorium on new petitions to end sooner rather than later. Also, we are trying to address issues that are, long-standing in terms of perceptions of fairness that would be there, COVID or not. So that's basically been our thought process on moving forward.
Okay, my last question is just about hardships and how you think that might relate to low-income renters or owners in the community. Whether do you sense that this will fall more heavily on lower income people or in people who are maybe 4 to a household, unrelated 4 that may all need a vehicle, or 3 out of 4 or something like that? I'm just looking at, our low income residents and if this is disproportionately going to affect them. And I wonder what your thoughts are, knowing the program so much better than we do.
Sure. So I will say a few things on that. One, this concern about hardship is why we are introducing for the first time a proposed discount for those who qualify for certain assistance programs. I will say, though, at least those who are in the current program, like who currently live in RPP zones, it's not universal, but generally speaking, they are higher income than the county population as a whole, which of course is not surprising because the program is primarily available now to people living in single family detached homes. In terms of the people who may be, sharing like as unrelated roommates or, housemates or something, I think the area where we've heard the most concern is about the potential of the reduced permit cap, not so much the price. So we are mindful that there are households that have, many or have more unrelated adults, and so they may have more vehicles. I think where we are here is simply attempting to, I will say though that the majority of the people currently in the program, I think it's something like 15% of households in the program currently get more than 3 total passes a year. But in the end, I think this is a question about trade-offs, whether we are, how much we're managing demand of the residents in the program in order to, especially as we potentially expand the eligibility of the program versus, letting as many vehicles or letting more vehicles be part of the program.
Okay, not to go on too long, the 50% discount, how would someone qualify for that?
Right. So we have yet to write down what would need to be shown, but somebody would qualify for the program if they qualify for WIC, SNAP benefits, the low-income home energy program, Medicaid, and temporary assistance for needy families. We relied on, also Social Security disability insurance. So we looked at the way in which people can qualify for Capital Bike Share reduced memberships, where we weren't responsible for doing income verification. All we're doing is saying, please show us that you can qualify for one of these things, and then that'll be enough for us.
Sounds good. Eric, I don't know what other folks are thinking. To me, it sounds like, 1, there's a lot of controversy. 2, there seem to be 2 sets of groups that think opposite on this, so it's kind of hard to know how to move forward. 3, we're in a COVID situation. I don't know how others feel about moving forward. My suggestion or thought is that maybe we, whatever we word in it, whatever the county board decides, it seems to me that like a year and 2 years or something from now, to do a really robust review of what was put in place to see if, these different factors that could have a big influence on the policies in this program might be, reevaluated to make sure there's not undue burden on any certain group, or, adjustments were made that don't reflect post-COVID commuting, stuff like that. So that would be my suggestion. And I want to thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Sorry, Alice. I completely didn't hear what you said because I lost connection. Sorry.
Oh, that's funny. Am I back?
Yeah, I had an internet issue. Joel let me back in.
Oh, sorry, no problem. I was just quickly saying that I'll be curious to hear what other folks are thinking, and I don't know how the group will decide, but regardless, I was thinking that if others were interested in putting some clause in the letter that regardless of what we decide or the board decide, if it goes forward with the board, I mean, that the idea of a robust review of the program in 1 year or again in 2 years, because there's so much in flux right now with COVID, and there do seem to be two large constituencies on either side of this program. There doesn't seem to be a lot of agreement across the county that it might be worth almost like a pilot or something, trying it out for a while and then reassessing to make sure there's not an undue burden on any, especially low income or multifamily versus single family detached residents. So just a thought
Yeah.
to consider.
Well, let's keep talking. I put myself next, and then there's several folks who have their hands raised, and I think they'll
Okay.
probably weigh in. I do want to first say, for Stephen and for county staff, this is an incredible amount of work. I think this is one of those issues where I don't know that you're going to find consensus, and I think you kind of stated that pretty well. I just think there's going to be some divergent opinions here. So, so kudos to you for all the work you've put into it. So a couple questions. So Stephen, you had said, I think you had alluded to the fact that there were forums that you all had planned on doing and then ultimately did not hold them due to COVID. Maybe you addressed this in your presentation, but why didn't the county end up kind of trying to do those forums even in a virtual way before moving forward with this proposal?
So the major reason to not do them in a virtual format was it wasn't really a technology issue. It was who would we be able to entice to show up, or who would we be able to get to show up. There were a few things. One, our primary method of trying to get the hardest to reach community members to participate, we were relying on, and we had already started partnerships with various service providers, direct service providers, to reach the hardest to reach. They, of course, were preoccupied and have remained preoccupied by the pandemic and the economic consequences of it. The other thing, of course, there are some issues around access to digital forums and the fact that, we'd basically be putting potentially more burden on those who are least able to participate and who also have been most affected by the pandemic. We had planned a bunch of things to help facilitate that, including childcare, meals being served, and even some assistance with transportation. But of course, we can't provide all those virtually, but the kids can't just go away. You don't get to just shove them out.
Believe me, I know.
Right. So, and the point of the dialogues wasn't really to achieve consensus. It was meant to get a bunch of different opinions in the room and see where where people participating, where their opinions could be changed by hearing from a more diverse group of people. And then also being able to tell the board, okay, so here you will probably continue to hear this opposition or cross-purposed viewpoints, but the important thing is we could tell you. But it was interesting because when we heard people who started off this way, they were at least able to budge a little bit on this or that. So the point though is that without being able to go and get the kind of diversity that we wanted with this, we just didn't think we were then going to have a very productive set of dialogues, virtual or otherwise.
Okay. So this is not a question, but more of just kind of a thought, and then I'll pass it on to my other commissioners. So we don't traditionally, hear about issues like this where the Housing Commission, we're usually bricks and mortar and housing and policy and some tenants issues. But I, you guys asked to be on the agenda, and I thought it was important that we review this and look at it from a housing perspective, because so much housing kind of controversy and development revolves around where's the parking, right? And the developer should provide the parking, it should be street parking and so forth. And And I think that's just always like one of the elephants in the room is the parking situation. It drives so many conversations. And I guess one just kind of general thought that I'd challenge my other commissioners on and staff as well would be this seems to be one of these policy issues that's very much like the county's current effort with the missing middle study that has started too, which is that in my view, we're not just thinking about the people that use it right now. We're thinking about the types of people that will use it right in the future. And the difficult thing for staff, which you've identified, is like those people that we need at the table. Like it's hard to find them, right? But we need to be considering them too, because so many of these conversations are disproportionately just like the single family homeowners. But like in housing policy, especially with missing middle, we need to think about like who do we want to come to Arlington to live here, right? They don't know who they are either. And so we need to be, in a way, kind of having a seat for them at the table, even if they don't know who they are yet. And so I think about this program too, because there's just a lot of equity issues regards here. It's basically a public resource that's being given to folks for a very nominal fee, right? I enjoy it. I have an RPP program on my street, and I feel conflicted about it too. And I think you definitely have done a lot of work, and that reflects that there's just compromises that the county is trying to make here, it looks like. So anyway, that's my 2 cents and putting my thumb on the scale. But over to Mike and then Laura. I'm sorry, Mike, Ben, and then Laura. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, awesome. Stephen, thanks so much for being here. Can you all hear me? Okay, cool.
Go ahead.
I want to acknowledge some comments, and I have 3 questions at the very end if you could help me with. So I just, in some of the public comments that we received, I did want to just echo my concern around the multiple adults living in a single residence. Then also align myself with the chair's comments around equity. I know in some of our lower income communities, there are multiple adults that do drive vehicles, and so I am a little concerned about that. I have a concern about the paid parking being a little inaccessible, just due to the Park Mobile, and I think there's a device that I think you said you could get from the county. But if you don't have a phone or you don't have internet or something like that on the time that you want to go get that device, I just have some concerns around that. Want to acknowledge that I think our county is diverse. I appreciate the efforts thus far, but I'm not quite certain that it's going to be a one-size-fits-all approach just due to the diversity of the county. Want to also acknowledge that I agree that we do need more data points when collecting some of the parking data. From what I've heard, it sounds like the sample size might be too limited to draw conclusions. Want to acknowledge also that I agree that we should be periodically reviewing this. I think in your comments you mentioned it had been 15 years since the last review. I worry that it'll be another 15 years if we don't put in place some type of periodic review statutes. I want to align myself with Commissioner Hogan's comments on the changing traffic patterns. I don't think we know enough just quite yet on the longer term impacts of COVID. And then just my questions. I was wondering if you could tell me how the votes came out in the other 2 commissions, why we're not considering using the ticket revenue to fund the program. And then you talked a little bit about the increase in the program. I just wonder if there's an option to gradually increase to get to that threshold instead of just going straight to it in the first year. So thanks so much.
So let me actually, before I forget it, can you clarify what you mean by your third point? Do you mean the fees, or tell me more about what you meant in terms of gradual?
Yeah, the fee increase. It seems like as of the next program year, it's increasing substantially. And I wonder if there's an opportunity in light of COVID to, maybe the county funds it at 50% the first year, and then the second year, it's more fully funded instead of 100% increase.
I see. Okay, thank you. So in terms of the votes, there was a unanimous vote to authorize or to support authorizing advertisement from Transportation Commission. From Planning Commission, they also voted, I don't think unanimously, but voted to advise the board to advertise the hearings. That was 11-1 actually. And they did though they set for themselves, like, we want to be able to talk about some other stuff though that might affect like what they actually put in writing to the board. In terms of the ticket revenue, the reason why we are not including that in our sources of funds for the program is because we look at tickets as they're not there to make money. They're there to basically get you to follow the law. And so, ideally, from my perspective, there would never be tickets because people would just be, doing what they're supposed to do. And we don't want to have, if people were to become more compliant, we wouldn't want that to then become like something where we're not we're not covering the cost of the program. So we think it should be based on, the people who enjoy the program from their fees, not the ticket revenue. In terms of graduated escalation in price, honestly, that's something I haven't thought before. I realize that on a percentage basis, this is a sharp increase, but we're still talking about what's essentially, a few dollars a month, or a few cents a day, which is substantially cheaper than, most garage parking. But I will say that, yeah, doing this in a gradual way is not something that I had considered up to now.
Thanks. Just a quick comment before I pass it on, if I may. I know it, a couple dollars might not really seem like a lot, but our food lines and bread lines are longer than they've ever been. So many in our community just don't even have the cents in the dollars. So just want to acknowledge that. Definitely appreciate the comments and the clarification on the ticket revenue.
Thanks, Mike. Ben, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for making this great presentation tonight. You might not remember, but I believe we spoke briefly at one of the public forums in Crystal City, not the one of the three that were canceled recently, but a couple of years back. I just wanted to kind of say, I don't believe it was discussed at the time, but I was really glad to hear about this option for a 2-hour pay metered essentially parking in any of the zones throughout the county. Certainly, I have become very frustrated myself when I've tried to go to events, but in specific, the very forum where we met on parking in Crystal City a couple of years back, and had a very difficult time finding parking myself because the entire surrounding neighborhood was under RPP. That was kind of difficult, and so I think this is one of the features of the new proposed program I think that I really like. In that regard, I kind of wonder, I'm going to tie this into a comment that Alice brought up about having multiple adults in a building, all with cars. I'm sorry, I was getting a little feedback there. And the problems that these households have, where they have typically perhaps more cars than permits that are available. Now, you mentioned during your talk that people in general would rather have a restriction in the number of passes than a higher fee per pass. But I think these households would actually be better served by essentially having more of a metered pay-as-you-go style parking, where there essentially is no caps on how many cars you can have, and you just maybe just have to pay a little bit more. And I understand the comment that every dollar helps, every dollar matters, and we're having lots of people having a hard time getting just the bare necessities paid. But when you think about the overall cost of ownership of a car, it's about 50 cents a mile to drive a car and operate it. And if you put 10,000 miles on your car a year, that's $5,000, and what's another $50 in a fee, right? So the question I have for you then is just, did you consider having meters instead of passes? And because I think, to the point of these households with multiple adults, I think that would better serve them.
So so I hear what you're saying. I think the issue of what's more fair, pricing or caps, is certainly one that it's like a frequent debate, because some people say, well, it's more fair if everybody just has access to the same stuff, but like classical economics would say, no, you should just price it, and then you can have as much as you want as you can pay for. So I hear what you're saying. We did find that a plurality, preferred the idea of managing the parking through a cap, but there certainly are plenty of people who would rather have some sort of pricing mechanism like you're talking about. In terms of a more pay-as-you-go style, one of the things that I talked about briefly is that we would be paying for some upgrades to the system that we use to administer the program. Those upgrades would also allow us to move to a paperless system that relies on license plates. We're not saying that that's what's going to happen, because that's kind of outside the scope and is a different question for us in terms of how to move the program forward. But issues about license plate technology aside, which we know can be controversial, one of the advantages of a system like that is that it would be theoretically possible to do a pay-as-you-go like permit, where if like you only need it, like, or you and your housemates, like you kind of do a shuffle with your cars, then oh well, I need to put it in the street tonight, so I'll just pay for tonight. That would be possible under that sort of system, but we haven't really been talking about it because like that kind of decision to move to that system, I think, is something that we need to bring up to the public separately.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Laura, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. My question is there an estimate or a projection of how much revenue might be coming in through this new program?
So in total, and that should be in the draft board report. I'm sorry, I don't have that number right in front of me, but I can try to get it quickly. We do. The brief answer to your question is yes, we do have an estimate in terms of the fee revenue. We do not have
the report says like another 363,000 in addition.
Right, and so then some of that money would be used to pay for like the capital expense of upgrading our system. In terms of but that's only based on the fee revenue, the permit and pass fee revenue. We haven't attempted to make an estimate of revenue from the 2-hour parking, mostly because we just don't have a good basis for figuring out, well, what would the demand for parking be on those streets from people who don't already have a permit or pass. So we didn't try to make a projection of that.
Thank you. The report was kind of long and I did get it like kind of late. So I also just wanted to say I want to also associate myself with remarks by Commissioners Hogan, Berkey, and Heminger, especially with respect to equity and the COVID impact. I thought it was interesting in the slides in particular that it seems like 2019, when you started the survey, it seems like a lifetime ago. And on top of that, the response rate was less than 8%. So I'm just wondering how much of that is really applicable, even when in that golden era, sometime in the next year, we get vaccinated and life, like we kind of back out in public with masks off and all of that, and maybe more people are out and about. There still will be changes in work patterns, where you work, housing patterns and such that we may not be able to really foresee right now. So in particular, I thought Commissioner Hogan's comments were very apt about needing memorializing an ordinance or somewhere that we revisit this program more than just every 15 years. Because there could be some pretty radical and unanticipated impacts because of COVID and the post-COVID era that we just can't take into account right now. Having said that, I'll close by saying you've already been working on this for something like 4 years. I don't want to hold back, the board being able to consider it and, where the chips fall. Let's make a decision and have more open conversation about the concerns. But I do really feel that we need to have in a year or two, looking at this again and being open to adjustments, particularly if we need some changes because of the impact of COVID or something we didn't anticipate in there. So with that, I'll wrap it up. Thanks.
May I just make one response to that, Mr.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the uncertainty about COVID, all true, and it does seem like forever ago that we did that survey. But I will say that the 8% response rate, I was actually pretty happy with. With this kind of survey, address-based survey like this, like response rates of like 3 to 5% are actually considered pretty good. I think one of the things that we've heard about a lot from the past few years, or the postmortems on election polls, they were talking. One of the things that came up is that it is just getting harder and harder to get people to answer any surveys on anything. So especially when we're not just going for the most interested, this was specifically meant to get people who are not part of the program now and who maybe have no interest in this idea whatsoever. 8%, I was actually, and our consultants were like, wow, parking really is important to people.
Okay, I stand corrected on that. And I do relate to survey fatigue. I know I've definitely got it. So thanks for that clarification.
I see it, Paul. I have another quick question. Stephen, what about, is there, like, I understand the ability for neighborhoods to petition for new permitting or changes, but, you know, this might be an elementary question, but have there been thoughts about the county, you know, unilaterally making changes or eliminating like just restrictions? Like, I'll give you a good example. Like, there are areas of the Pike that have basically what I would call de facto 24-hour permit parking, because the restriction will go from like 8 a.m. to 1 a.m., right? So folks can park there after 1 a.m. as long as they move their cars. And these streets are almost always empty and bereft of cars. And it's clearly an area where the county, I think, would be good to reevaluate. Has that been given any thought, like the types of streets themselves, outside of just responding to neighborhood, you know, petitions?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has, and we hear this frequently. In terms of, to my knowledge, restrictions have only been removed unilaterally once, and that was just because there was so much political pressure about it, frankly. You know, this is something that's, of course, like near and dear to the people who have it, so it's very difficult to even take on the idea of removing it. In terms of looking back, though, or reviewing, there's kind of a unique, or not unique, but there's a problem in reviewing existing restrictions, because when you ask the question, well, are these restrictions, like, quote, needed? The question is like, well, so are we going to remove the restrictions and then see what happens, or what? Because then we're like asking this counterfactual question, well, but for the restrictions, what would happen? So we have not found a way to have, like, you know, a predictable or transparent process by which we would say X, Y, and Z, therefore we will keep these restrictions or we will remove them. So that's where we've been stymied in trying to come up with a responsible way to, like, lay out like prescriptively, like, this is what we will do to review restrictions over time.
Okay. I have thoughts, but I'm going to just hold them for now. Paul, you put your hand up, but you took it down. Is there anything you wanted to ask?
No, I think I just betray more ignorance than I care to, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Never. So last question, Stephen. So we didn't really talk about this, but this is incredibly relevant to housing. So site plan developments are not, there's a list of folks who, if they live in basically like high rises, would not be eligible to participate. Like, if you live in a development built by a site plan, form-based code. I mean, is it? I mean, basically, do you need to be like in a by right, you know, development? I mean, it's the exception is kind of swallowing the rule there a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about that rationale? And I mean, that's basically most folks in those types of buildings who would not be eligible.
Sure. I mean, well, first of all, let me step back and talk about, like, the context of it, right? Because, sure. I mean, this is, of course, like a flashpoint for the program, because there are many residents who see the exclusion of any residents as being unfair, but there are many residents who like that the program has, as far back as we can find, always excluded the highest density development. There was a long stretch where by right development, or at least small multifamily, was eligible, and then for some reason that was actually, like, taken away in the late 90s and then added back with a lot of conditions in 2005. What we are doing in practice is trying to balance out, like, those two different interests. I will say, practically on the ground, we estimate, we don't know how many multifamily buildings would be eligible to petition under the current rules, because there's so many site-specific hurdles you have to jump over. At most, we think about a third of the existing multifamily housing stock could apply under the current rules, but it could be far lower. Under the proposed program, about 40% of the county's multifamily housing stock would be able to participate in the program. So it's certainly not everybody, it's not the majority, but it does increase under this proposal.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for questions. I mean, this is, I think we're at the point where we would entertain motions. I'll put my thumb on the scale one more time, and then I'm going to open it up to motions. I certainly have some concern. There's a lot of work, and I do not envy your position, Stephen. This is a lot of compromises. It's very controversial. Those who feel passionately about it feel very passionately about it. And I just think it's it's just compromises. I mean, that's kind of what it seems to be, and I understand why that approach is taken. There's some things I have concerns about, like not having the forums. I think this process maybe could have been more equitable, but that is certainly easier said than done, given current conditions and some of the challenges you laid out. I guess where I'm at, I think there are some folks in the commission who maybe want to delay, and if there's a motion there, somebody should go ahead and make it. I guess where I'm at personally is I think it's an imperfect policy. It's a little better than we currently have. If left to my own devices, I'd probably be much more aggressive in the equity lens, but I'm only one person and it's not up to me. But I also am thinking about like grand context of what housing we want to do as a community, and the missing middle study is underway. And I just think, from a practical standpoint, a lot of the folks who have strong feelings about this program are also the same types of folks who may have strong feelings about missing middle, which is really important to me that equity in housing be pursued. And to me, I just kind of come down to, I think that's kind of more pressing at the moment. So I'm inclined to see how this works and kind of go forward, but that's just me. But if there are motions out there to amend or to simply, recommend adoption, those, have at it, guys. Somebody can make a motion. I think Alice had ideas. So Alice, I don't know if you were going to make a motion here, or if not, I'll just motion that we recommend approval.
I wasn't going to make a motion, but I would just suggest, it's hard to know because we can't see each other and we can't talk too much in a group like this. But if people are interested in moving forward, I would suggest that we put some kind of language in the letter about the fact that, changes are coming, like, what might come out of missing middle, what might come out of the, affordable housing master plan, and that we're not sure about how this could, affect lower income or multifamily residents. And so, strongly encourage them to look at this in 1 year and 2 years or something, with the idea of an openness toward any adjustment, like we said, not something that's 10 or 15 years without a review. That's all.
Go ahead, Laura. I'm still unclear with that. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I'm not unclear. I think I understand what Alice was saying, and I would, if that was a motion, I second it. And that's basically that whatever we choose to do, the communication to the board and the staff and the county manager should be that we return to analyzing the impacts of this new structure, if it moves forward, in a year or again in 2 years, just so we can work out any kinks or major problems with it, or maybe it's going to just work beautifully. Who knows? We really don't know, but we need to examine it regularly so we can be nimble about adjusting it so that it's equitable and achieves what it's supposed to do.
Thank you, Laura. That's like what I was gonna say. You said it so much better. Thanks.
Oh, sure.
I would just add, Eric, what you had mentioned earlier about the fact that they weren't able to hold the community fora. And that's an important component of trying to touch base with the folks this may affect who aren't as connected, to let their voices be heard, that in a year or two, when it's safer to do that, there should be some direct outreach to certain groups to make sure their voices are heard in a way they couldn't do this time. So a little bit more justification for why it should be reviewed again soon.
Okay, so let's do this. And again, we don't really follow Robert's rules, but I will consider that basically. So the motion would be attaching it to just, generally recommending that the board approve requesting to advertise with the staff report that that the staff return to perform an analysis in 2 years of the study. Is that a fair characterization of what you're saying, Alice?
I mean, I think I might say a maximum of 2 years, within, no more than or something. I don't know the wording, but certainly no more than 2 years, because people will have already paid for their permits twice by then. A lot of things will have happened, so we could get, we'd want to get a handle on any burdens before it got too much beyond there, I would think.
Okay, and Laura basically seconded that. Is that okay, Laura, with that? Would you second that motion?
That's great.
Okay. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll vote on that kind of amendment, and then if there are any other amendments, we can vote on those, and then we can vote on the the general motion. So I need to go back and pull up my roster here. So to be clear, what we are voting on is to. Well, I guess let's do this. I'm kind of doing things out of order. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve approve recommending the RTA, the request to advertise, and then we will consider, and if I have a second for that, can I get a second for that?
Second.
Okay, awesome. And then we will consider whether that motion would be amended with Alice's motion to include that additional language, if everybody understands. So what we're voting on right now is not the ultimate recommendation to the board. It's to simply add Alice's motion to include in the language of the letter that we ask the board to instruct staff to return to analyze the impact of the implementation, no longer than 2 years after it's implemented. Everybody clear? Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, even though I'm not, I'm a liaison and not voting? Does this mean that you're recommending that they advertise, because you use that language, or that you recommend that they adopt this? I thought it was going for adoption.
So right now it is, Stephen, this is simply a request to advertise, right?
Okay, so that's all it is.
I have that correct, Stephen, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's what I wanted to make sure that I heard you saying. So the vote by the county board on advertising would be in January. Is that what I also heard?
I believe that's correct.
More
I believe
time for people to
vote. Let's let Stephen respond.
No, so the request to authorize will go to the board in December. There would then be a vote to adopt in January. We are coming to
there'll be a public hearing.
Correct.
Correct. Yes.
So we are coming to you like most directly on the request to authorize. However, we would like, your input on the adoption at this point. So if you are making a suggestion about what to change in our proposal, it would be most welcome right now.
Yeah, exactly. Because once the request to advertise has been approved by the board, there's certain parameters that can't necessarily be changed. But once that happens, as I understand it, so it's easier to change now. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. So again, folks, this is to simply add Alice's motion to the general approval. And excuse me now, because now I lost my roster. Still acclimating to this digital environment 9 months in, right? Okay. Okay. So on the amendment on the table, Commissioner Arthur.
Yes.
Commissioner Berkey, yes. Commissioner Bray.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes.
Commissioner G.
Yes.
Commissioner Heminger.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Montgomery.
Yes.
Commissioner Norris.
Yes.
Commissioner Rubel Cava.
Yes.
I will get it right. Commissioner Surface.
No.
Commissioner Sims. Okay, so that is, I believe, is that 11 for, 1 against, and that's it, and no abstentions. So that amendment passes. So that will attach to just the general recommendation motion. Are there any other amendments that folks would like to try to attach? Laura, you have your hand up, but I assume that's from before. Yep. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and then vote on the general motion to recommend that the county board advertise this in their December meeting with the amendment that it also include the instruction that staff return to analyze the impact of the implementation of this new program in no later than 2 years. And I will come back to my list and do the roll call again. Commissioner Arthur.
Yes.
Commissioner Berkey, yes. Commissioner Bray.
Yes, did you hear me?
Yep, gotcha, Holly. Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes.
Commissioner G.
Yes.
Commissioner Heminger.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Montgomery.
Yes.
Commissioner Norris.
Yes.
Commissioner Rubalcaba.
Yes.
Commissioner Surface.
No.
Okay, and no Commissioner Sims. So that is.
This is Commissioner Sims.
Oh, awesome. Okay, Commissioner Sims.
Yes.
Okay, so that is 12 in favor and 1 against. So that will pass, and we will send a letter to the board recommending that they request to advertise. As we always do, when we have any type of dissent either way, we ask folks just to provide some context there so we can also explain our views to the board. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Sure.
So we
Well, I
can
don't
make
want
sure.
to.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
I just don't feel there's enough data points, and that there's. I would just like to see this whole thing basically postponed until after COVID and after more data on this percentage of the percentage of cars on the street, like the data that the county has been collecting.
Okay. And I will try my best to share the draft with you. As kind of has been my prior practice before it gets sent out, so I reflect that accurately. Awesome. Okay, Stephen, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Alice.
Sure. Yeah, I just was going to ask the staff if they could possibly provide some information to the Disability Commission on this. I think we're meeting this month as well, and it would be helpful because I think, there are folks who are going to be involved in this, and also I wanted to know in terms of comments we've made at this meeting, whether they will be included, like the one language change that I had about consumer-directed personal assistance.
I will say at this point, yes, I'm happy to send the draft board report and this presentation to the liaison for the Disability Advisory Commission. In terms of the language, what I'll say is I want to make sure that I talk to some others on staff to make sure I'm getting it right. But I will say that I'm going to start with the language you just gave me and incorporate that into the proposal. But I don't want to promise that I'm going to give the exact phrasing just because I want to.
Well, actually, that is because I work in that area and work for the Independence Center, where we do have consumer-directed personal assistance. I know that that's the language, but I wish to consult with us. So, so I appreciate that, and I also, the thought that I had also is that in the list of the qualifying incomes, you had SSDI and such. You didn't mention veterans' disability benefits as well, and there might be some misinterpretation if there's in guidance.
Okay, we'll look into that.
Thanks, Doris. Okay, we do need to move on. We have other items on the agenda. So Stephen, hey, thank you so much for coming, for bearing with all of our questions, and thank you for all your hard work on this. Not the easiest task to take on, so thank you.
Happy holidays.
Yep, happy holidays. Take care. Okay, next on the agenda, the 2021 work plan. Woo. All right. So this is more of a commission-centric item. Apologies, I sent out a draft very late. I have been swamped. So Joel has this awesome, read my mind, pulling it up to share the screen, but I did send this out to the commissioners via email. So what I've done here, and I'll give some context here. Let's start there with the context. So we kind of did it this year, but not really. I don't know that we approved it. We got interrupted with COVID. I think we talked about this at our February meeting, and then just things fell apart, right? With the coronavirus. But the county board would like to see commissions more consistently have annual work plans moving forward to identify priorities, so that they can get a good sense of like what we're working on and what we think is important. I think this is important because it keeps our focus on agreed areas of agreement of things that we want to be working on. Very often what we talk about here can feel quite reactive. There's a lot of developments, things like the RPP, for example, that come up. And this kind of makes sure that we can keep our eye on things that we think are important and we need to focus on too as a commission. So what I did here is I tweaked the one that we'd kind of talked about for 2020, for 2021. This is simply a draft that we can work off of, and it's somewhat aspirational in tone, but it's to identify certain areas where we want to make sure we give focus. So we have this. I'm trying to think about the best way to do this. Joel, I don't know if you can kind of make edits. Can you just make edits and will it show up on the screen because you're sharing it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so let's do this. If you don't mind just taking some notes, because folks sent several emails and there's a couple things that I want to just maybe throw in the draft that you already have, and then we can just start talking about them. Alice sent an email, Doris sent some thoughts. I think Laura might have others. I'll have to go take a look. So if you don't mind just jotting a couple notes down, it may be, if you go down to the section where it talks about, I think it's second page. Yeah, we can just stick these in the policy area right now, and then maybe later figure out a better place to put them. So Alice had a couple things about reinstating our annual field trips, if those are possible. We as a commission used to take annual field trips in September or October for Affordable Housing Month. And I'm just going to keep scrolling down. Doris sent some things. I put some language about liaisoning with other commissions. Maybe put a note there about outreach also to the Disability Advisory Commission. Doris, you also put a note about the, I think, Aging Commission in here.
Yeah,
maybe you didn't. Yeah, the Aging Commission. Yeah, so the Aging, so this is just to let the Housing Commission know. The Aging Commission had reached out and wanted to know what our plans were for 2021. So I said, well, we're figuring them out at our next meeting. And so they've invited me to come to their next meeting, which is, I think, on the 15th or so this month. And so I'll share with them kind of what we talk about here. I didn't include everything just because you just can't do everything. I'm just kind of scrolling down here, see if I had any other emails.
Consolidated plan, though.
Let's see here. So you said, so adding the 5-year consolidated and 1-year action plans. Yeah, I mean, we can make a note about that, and maybe we as a commission can talk about how much we want to put on this versus kind of having a focus on certain items. We actually are talking about the 5-year consolidated plan right after this tonight. Okay. All right, so let's just do this. Let's open up to just general discussion. Holly has her hand up, and then Karen.
Yeah, I have a question about, you put the school board on there in the first section.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to kind of talk about what you plan to do with working with the school board. And then my other comment was on that first group of those first bullets under A.
Mm-hmm.
You have you use the verbs making and working, and I would just say make presentations and work with and do things like, do it like that as opposed to working with.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and then but I wasn't sure why you had the school board on there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would keep that. But one of the things that I think I had personally thought about would be a lot of like discussion about housing developments and really affordable housing developments. The school stuff kind of gets tied in, and I just had long thought, and I think I'll call her out because I know Laura's a big schools person, so maybe she wants to speak to this. But I think that we would at some point be well suited in connecting with maybe not so much the school board, but maybe other, I don't know, other advisory groups within APS or some type of entity where we could talk about intersection of housing and schools. Because I think about, like, for example, there's a lot of controversy about this Fort Henry, the HC development. And a lot of the conversation revolves around school populations and housing, and like they are related, but they are also separate. And so I just kind of thought about maybe fleshing out that conversation in a community forum could be helpful, but there's also just a lot of things we want to do too. So I'm not necessarily wed to it in the action plan. So I don't know that I would keep it, but if there are other folks like Laura, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but or other folks who want to put it in there, that's fine with me, but I probably would take it out at this point.
Or maybe you could just say explore opportunities with.
Yeah, I think that's, I like that. Go ahead, Karen. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, why don't you just go ahead, Laura, since I totally called you out.
That's okay. That's all right. It's probably in there in the first place because I bet back in February I raised it. And I still actually feel very strongly about it. I think that you said it really well, Eric, about the intersection and the impact of housing decisions on schools and vice versa. Fort Henry is a really great example of that because you're right. I mean, there is a lot of concern right now about the increase in the number of free and reduced lunch students that'll be going to Drew as a result of that. And we don't want to, concentrate, for example, so many free and reduced lunch in one or two schools, for example. So I would really be appreciative, and I think it would, overall be beneficial for our work plan to reflect working with schools and getting their input in some way. I was going to suggest that keeping it in, but instead of saying school board, say, representatives of the school's community or those impacted by, there's ways of finessing that so that it's not just the school board. It could be, help me here. It could be the.
What if we say like, Joel? Can you scroll down, Joel? So what if we said like, no, I'm a little back up. Yeah. So where it says Arlington Public Schools, Joel. So delete that, and we could say, members of the public school community in Arlington. Like that's sufficiently vague.
Yeah.
I mean, part of this, and I don't want to be talking too much. I want to hear from everybody. One of my thoughts, though, was, we have this this work plan, but really what drives it is like folks' different like passions and things they're interested in. So like Laura, for example, I know you're interested in school stuff. Like if you or other folks would want to say, you know what, like I think that we as a group would be well off like liaisoning or like having some type of like joint meeting or something with a group that would be appropriate from the schools community, and we could kind of at least have a conversation about how these issues intersect. I think that would be great. It almost would basically be kind of like a new kind of ad hoc subcommittee. I think that's how we could do it, because it's just there's only so much time in each regular housing commission meeting, right? But that could be like one way. Really, how this is all going to drive is through kind of subcommittees and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I think that makes sense.
Okay, I'm okay. I like this language because it's broad enough that it gets us beyond just like reflexively turning to the school board.
Karen, go ahead.
I just had a comment. I was just wondering do we have like priorities? Are there like the ones on the top, are they more important than the ones on the bottom? Because I know that we can't always do everything. And are we going to try to prioritize things? That's just my comment.
Let me pull up my own version here. Well, I mean, that's also up to the commission. There's a lot going on. So not to be coy, but I think you hit upon a kind of a tension, which is we can decide to focus on 3 things and hit them hard, or we can kind of be broad-based, and either approach has its merits, right? So I'll open it up to folks and what they think. I'm channeling Holly because I know you, Holly, when you were chair, you talked about this, which is basically, the things that drive in this group are the things that people kind of have a passion for and then they run with. So, if we are focused in a certain area, it often is because somebody was really interested in it and just kind of grabbed the ball and ran with it. So I would keep that in mind. We can talk about certain things, but they're only going to really matter if we can get somebody to lead a subcommittee or kind of push that forward. A good example of that is Alice is getting a tools and trends meeting going for the review of the Affordable Housing Master Plan, right? And that's really going to kickstart our involvement and kind of keeping up with that and having input on that process, because we just can't do all of that in a regular commission meeting. So I don't know. That's not really answering your question, Karen. I think that's kind of up for debate with us, what folks want to do.
Yeah, it's just like a really long list. I mean, I'm like, wow.
Go ahead, Alice. Alice?
Hi. I was just thinking, it is a long list and there's a lot on here. In some ways, I feel like if we could word it so that we didn't make a commitment to address thoroughly all of them, but yet they're kind of on our list of priorities or, foci, things that we're trying to keep an eye on, because maybe there is a balance between what we kind of set out to do and then what actually needs to get done or develops during a calendar year. And so we need that flexibility, but we also, it's helpful to have something like a, sort of like a guide along the way. So for example, we could keep some of these things, we could order them in, a order of priority, or we could leave them and change the wording. So those are options. But like Joel, if you don't mind scrolling down to the proposed calendar that he has, I think it's near the bottom. So in the past, this looks like some of what we had worked on a few years ago, Holly and I and before and with people that she and I were with earlier on, was almost, and I think this is 12 bullets here. So I think it's something like what we had in the past was almost like a small focus for every meeting through the year. So maybe it would be, the top ones are January, February, March, etc. And so what we had done, and this is, an idea to use or not, but just to talk about that was kind of what came up in a calendar year around different policy making issues like budget season. or financial issues around when the NOFA would come out, or when VHDA either applications were due, like in March, or the announcements of winners came out in, I think it's May and June. So there were ways that we were able to kind of tailor our meetings with a little bit of either an informational thing that was kind of educational, related to something that was going on right around that time frame, or something we'd be dealing with that we knew was coming up. So that might be a way to take some of the things from the top that feel a little overwhelming and fill them in these 12 slots of, like, in the ideal, unless something comes up, we might address these items, generally speaking, in this order because they follow this order in the kind of like the calendar of events that occur in a calendar year. So I don't know, Joel, Eric, if that was your intention, or Joel, that was one of my points in my email earlier today, was asking, are there any items that come through the year that we aren't capturing here? Like when we first started this, there was no NOFA, for example. So when is the NOFA cycle? Is there going to be a NOFA? We can put things in if Joel or other staff might know when things are coming up. So that's just an example. Another one would be the master plan we're about to review. So we know that's going to be in the first probably 6 months of the year. So we could put them in there if that helps. So just ideas to kind of organize.
Yeah, there's a couple, I got you, Haley. There's a couple things that, like, I know that we're doing, right? Like, so you're getting a tools and trends meeting going for the affordable housing master plan. So, like, that's just something that should be in there. The missing middle study, I talked to Anne, the housing director, yesterday, and kind of strongly suggested on the commission's behalf, I hope it's okay, but I basically said, you guys are doing like these community partners, and there's a little different like engagement effort there the staff is doing around that. But I said, we're the housing commission, and so between us and planning, I think we really need to be keyed in on that study kind of all the way. If that's an informal group or whatever, but somebody from our group needs to be kind of keyed in, because that's an incredibly important amount of work and a policy item that's coming up. So those are like two things that we're kind of going to already be doing. So the question is, how many of these other things that are more affirmative, like Alice, you're saying, do we want to be putting on there? Go ahead, Haley.
Thanks. I think my sense from this conversation is we're all kind of juggling or pondering the idea of priority. One thing I think, I think this is a great list, and thank you for preparing this. One thing I think I would suggest, it would be maybe moving the policy section up, and maybe not everyone agrees. I love the idea of the collaboration. I think that's a great idea. I'd be really intrigued about having a joint commission meeting, particularly with Alexandria or with Fairfax. I think that's great because housing is a regional issue. But I think we're all talking tremendously about the policy, and I think that's a really important segue from that first, under 2A is a chief advisor to the county board on housing issues. So I don't know if that's a very helpful comment, but I think from a priority perspective, I would advocate for moving those policy items up, because I think we all seem to feel like that's a key piece of our mission.
I know that I don't have a problem with it, so we can just drag and dump, drag that up. I want to be mindful of time. It's 8:45. We still have some stuff on the agenda. Maybe what we end up doing is let's maybe talk a little bit more, and then maybe how this works out is maybe we don't vote tonight, and maybe I kind of massage this a little bit more, and I can send it out again, and then maybe we just do like a vote in January, so we're not under pressure to approve anything tonight. This isn't like super formal. It's just kind of a guide, and it's also kind of an informational item for the county board. A couple other thoughts I had would be that maybe we want to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the draft that I had. That's okay. There's a couple things on there, like the Housing Conservation District. If you go to, I don't know if we need to keep that in there right now. It's happening, but it's not imminent. So maybe I would take that out, maybe delete that, Joel. And then I also had put a review of the county's affordable housing ordinance. I know there are some folks like with Alliance for Housing Solutions are kind of looking at that, but that's not anything that's at the county level at this point. And it's important, but between like the affordable housing master plan and the missing middle, I think that's a ton of policy to chew off in 1 year. So I probably would take that off too, Joel. Going back down, and then I want to make sure other folks have the opportunity to contribute. So, you know, one thing, if you could add, Joel, that's already kind of listed below would be, we've talked about doing some type of session on financing, like an educational session. And I don't know who would do that. Maybe we would ask staff to put something together and we'd coordinate to give enough lead time, because that would be a little bit of an effort. But I remember back in January, February, we talked about how it would just be helpful as a community, but also with new members to talk about how this financing works. So because so much of this just breaks down to how the financing shakes out, right? All these things we want to do, but really it comes down to how we're going to pay for it. Go ahead, Alice, you have your hand up.
I didn't know I had my hand up, but okay. The only thing I was going to add was some of the things that you're mentioning, Eric, to take off the list. I'm wondering if it's worth having another section near the bottom that's like future items, or like I wouldn't want to lose what you've come up with and things that we think may next year, you know, come in, or maybe even the end of this year, just to kind of have them somewhere. It's just a maybe like a depository or something. Nothing specific. It's just a thought.
I mean, I don't think they need to be in the draft. I mean, I think we're not going to, I mean, I have previous drafts and we'll, you know, we can come back to it, but, we do have some folks who haven't spoken up. You know, I'm not going to make people speak, but, you know, Ben, Charles, Evelyn, Paul, Sarah, I think I got everybody, Anika, if you're on there. Just want to make sure if you folks had things you wanted to contribute, you know, you have the opportunity here.
Yes, I'm still here. No, I'm good to go. I'm just still listening and agreeing with everything that's going on and being said. No, nothing else to add.
Okay. Anyone else before we kind of, move on and, finalize this up? Oh, awesome. Okay. So we'll do Sarah and then Ben.
Yes, same here. I'm listening. I actually did like the idea of moving the policy up, because I feel like that would really kind of put the focus of what we're doing, and then everything else kind of goes with that. But again, just listening, I'm pretty much kind of agreeing with everyone right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I know there's been some push to kind of remove things, or at least prioritize things, but staring here at what's on the screen right now, we specifically mentioned the missing middle study, but absent is any mention, at least from what I've seen, unless I missed it, of the Lee Highway planning. And I think that's those two are both really important in terms of affordable housing. So if we're going to mention one, I think we should mention the other two.
Plant. I can't help but make the Plan Lee Highway / Plan fill in the blank, whatever.
Yeah, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's Lee Highway, right? Yeah.
Plan TBD, route. Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning that, Ben. You're absolutely right. I think I don't know that there's been any action, but I believe you're still our kind of representative to that effort, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and there has been maybe one email sent out by the principal planner there. I forget her name. Just kind of outlining kind of the future, near-term future of what's going to happen. But no meetings that I've heard of anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's do this. I want to be respectful of time. We have a little bit more to go. We're going to look at the consolidated plan here. So Joel, if you don't mind, when you have a chance, if you could just email me back the draft that you got here. And then I will do my best to kind of take a look at this soon here and then shoot a draft back to the commission. And if you have thoughts, please email those to me directly, not to the group. And then hopefully we can come back next month with something that's a bit more finalized that we can try to approve. That sounds good. So we'll defer, formal action tonight so we can get to the next agenda item. So thanks everybody for your thoughts and for helping us push the ball forward here. Awesome. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is a review, I believe, of the consolidated plan, and that's with county staff.
All right, thank you. So I will try and move through this fairly quickly. Doris alluded to this. Largely in years past, this has been more of the purview of CIDSAC, Community Development Citizen Advisory Commission. However, the Housing Commission, given the large role of housing in the consolidated plan, has played a role in the development of this as well. So the consolidated plan is largely designed to help Arlington assess their affordable housing and community development needs and market conditions, and then to use that to make data-driven, place-based investment decisions. The consolidated plan serves as the framework for a community-wide dialogue to identify housing and community development priorities that then align focus funding that we get from HUD, such as the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and the Home Investment Partnership Program. So this consolidated plan is carried out each year of the 5 years through an annual action plan that provides really concise summary of the actions, activities, and how we're going to spend that federal funding to really address those priority needs and specific goals that are identified in the consolidated plan. Grantees then report on accomplishment through the annual CAPER, Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. So it's really a blueprint for a number of different things: developing affordable housing, preventing homelessness, ensuring fair housing, expanding opportunities, and improving neighborhoods. A large reason for this is because you can spend CDBG in particular on a large number of different things in your community. So in order to develop that blueprint, we must look at census data and other data to really take a deep look at the housing market and the community development needs of the county. So we need to draft HUD required elements for the consolidated plan. These include a snapshot of our community demographics, a section on fair housing, affordable housing, and community development, which looks at things such as health, economic development, and energy efficiency. It also includes sections on anti-poverty, supportive housing, and homelessness. The last big component is community participation, which I'll go into further in a later slide. So based on this analysis, we then develop housing and community development needs and goals. So for the last plan, three priority needs were identified. The first was affordable housing, looking at both the production of rental and homeownership units, home improvement, energy efficiency, and resident services. The second was economic self-sufficiency and well-being, and this was specifically related to barriers to employment, financial stability, public health, youth services, and senior services. The third need identified was sustainable neighborhoods, which revolved around the physical condition of the neighborhoods and the community engagement with residents. So based on those needs, the county developed four consolidated plan goals. First one, create and sustain affordable housing, promote healthy and self-sufficient households, stabilize individuals and families at risk of homelessness, and foster vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods. Under each of these goals, a number of strategies were identified, and these were the basis for making funding decisions for the annual action plan, something that CIDSAC largely takes over each year. Under each strategy, we then told HUD what the expected accomplishment would be. So for the development of this consolidated plan, we took a look back at our accomplishment data to see how we've done. For overall highlights, for the past 5 years, we had over 140,000 hours of volunteer time that was donated to programs funded by the Community Development Fund. This volunteer time is valued at over $3 million. Grantees leveraged over $23 million in sources other than CDBG, CSBG, and AF Housing Services to carry out those programs that we funded. And then the county leveraged $18 million in AHIF dollars to support 4 million multifamily projects that were also funded by CDBG and HOME. So for goal 1, over $5 million in CDBG and $9 million in HOME program funds was allocated to support development and rehab of 4 different multifamily affordable housing projects. These projects will contribute to the rehab of 263 affordable housing units and the addition of 254 affordable housing units in Arlington. Rebuilding Together received $350,000 between FY 2016 and 2020 to provide maintenance, accessibility, and health and safety repairs to 75 homes occupied by either elderly or disabled residents. And then the MyPAP, the Moderate Income Purchase Assistance Program, assisted 32 households in becoming first-time home buyers. So we've come up with some recommended changes to our activities. The biggest ones for goal 1 is to clarify that we are talking about both rental housing and home ownership units. We are adding activity 1.2 there, the rehab of repair of existing committed affordable rental housing, and this includes improving energy efficiency. And then in activity 1.4, we are clarifying that this is for first-time homebuyers, and that assistance can include either direct assistance and or housing counseling. For goal 2, promote healthy and self-sufficient families. Highlights included a number of things. This funds probably the most amount of projects that we have. For example, AHC's Project Discovery supported 467 middle and high school students with after-school programming. 104 of the program's high school graduates enrolled in college. Just Neighbors assisted 242 very low-income households in obtaining work authorization documents, including work permits, green cards, or citizenship. LEDC made 23 loans to low and moderate income entrepreneurs, contributing to the creation of 15 jobs and retention of 47 more jobs. Northern Virginia Dental Clinic provided 610 very low-income clients with regular dental care. Service Source, which is a nonprofit that supports job development and workforce training programs for persons with disabilities, trained 49 individuals and assisted 33 individuals in obtaining employment. And lastly, the Virginia Cooperative Extension provided 222 individuals with financial literacy training. So for changes, one of the areas that has become obviously very evident during COVID is how the digital divide is impacting our most vulnerable residents. So in activity 2.3, we've added reducing employment barriers through digital literacy. And then likewise in 2.4, we are recommending adding an activity to reduce barriers to equitable access and connectivity to digital technology. And this would include broadband internet and devices so that families could have access to affordable internet as well as those devices to connect to it. And then for activity 2.6, we're clarifying that this activity is focusing on the health and well-being of community members. And this includes accessing healthcare and healthy food options. For goal 3, stabilize households at risk of homelessness. There's 4 activities there. Note that accomplishments for this are projects funded through the Community Development Fund only, and don't represent all the county's homelessness efforts. So goal 3 highlights includes AHC's eviction prevention program that assisted 629 households by helping them avoid eviction. Arlington County's Continuum of Care shelter program served over 3,200 individuals. Arlington Thrive Daily Fund provided same-day rental assistance to over 1,500 individuals and families. ACE-BAN's supportive housing project provided housing and case management services to 24 chronically homeless individuals. And Volunteers of America Housing Services program provided rapid rehousing services to over 1,200 individuals. So after consultation with the Department of Human Services, who staffs the action plan to end homelessness, we are not recommending any changes to the strategies at this time. The last goal, foster vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods. Highlights for this goal include Arlington County staff assisting over 2,000 individuals with technical assistance and referrals. In addition, over 7,000 individuals participated in community events and or were educated on fair housing issues, code enforcement, and homeownership programs. So the biggest recommended changes are that we are no longer funding CAF inspections with CDBG funds. However, just to clarify, this is still being done, but it is being funded now by local dollars. Improved energy efficiency of CAF portfolio was integrated into Goal 1, the affordable housing goal. Is this where it has been counted when we reported to HUD? A priority area related to improving public infrastructure was added to allow for improved access to broadband and affordable housing. And then we clarified that the neighborhood cleanup priority area is to improve the physical condition of neighborhoods. And lastly, we added a priority area related to the neighborhood small grants program. This is a program the county has managed for a number of years, but wasn't specifically called out before. So moving forward on developing the con plan with the updated goals, we will continue with data collection, analysis, and the needs assessment, as well as continue with community engagement. We'll continue with the draft consolidated plan based on the community input that we've received. We plan to publish a draft in February and then receive feedback on that draft. And then ultimately, in April, the county board will consider the con plan and the 2022 action plan before it's submitted to HUD in May. As far as community engagement, we did have a kickoff meeting with CIDSAC back in September. We had a meeting on the analysis of impediments to fair housing with the Tenant Landlord Commission on November 18th. We had a community-wide meeting in November on the consolidated plan. We have a survey that is currently open now. And then this month and next, we'll touch base with a number of commissions. Then we plan to be back before CIDSAC for a review of the draft plan. As I mentioned, there's the survey, and comments can be submitted to conplan at arlingtonva.us. So that I will open it up to any questions or comments. What we've been doing largely when we've been going to these community events is asking people, what do you think are the most pressing needs, and then what activities are needed to address those needs. And that's it.
Ben, you've got your hand up, but I don't know if that was from before. Okay. Do folks have questions or input they'd like to provide to Joel? Mike, go ahead.
Thanks. Could we make the slides available? I don't think I saw them earlier.
Yes, I'll put them on the website.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Other folks? Laura, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Mike asked my question. I just wanted to get the slides available so I could look at them a little bit more in depth too. So thank you for asking, Mike.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Doris.
Okay. One, I wanted to know whether there usually in the last couple of 5-year plans, there was a section that was supposed to directly address activities and goals for Olmsted compliance, and I'm wondering whether that's in the draft that you're working on now. And the second is, you mentioned the community meetings, but I don't recall seeing any invitation to the disability community. Has there been one yet? Because I think you said something about a November 18 meeting, but I didn't see that come out to ECNV or anything.
Yes, the November 18th meeting was pretty widely advertised. Both commissions, Disability Housing Commission, received a notice. Also, I'm planning to present both on the consolidated plan and the fair housing plan at the Disability Advisory Commission in December.
It's going to come to us in December. Is that what you just said?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's okay. What about the Olmsted, though, goals? Because is there something in there about that yet? Because it's been in several analysis of impediments anyway. And I'm wondering what analysis of impediments you're using, since there's this regional effort going on too. Are we using an older analysis of impediments right now?
No, we have updated our analysis of impediments, and there's a draft on the website, and I can send you that. We've actually worked with a consultant to develop that, and we actually, even though the fair housing ruling was rescinded by the current administration, the county is committed to following that rule, and as best we can, given the guidance that's still out there. So we are developing our analysis of impediments and our fair housing plan to address those impediments using the old rule. And that data and plan will feed into the work that's going on in the region.
So the AI is in process, just like the consolidated plan is right now, because usually you all finish it before the consolidated plan. So that's kind of what I was asking. It's in process now.
Yeah, the analysis of impediments is actually further along than the consolidated plan.
Okay.
Thanks, Doris. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the slides if you could pull it up again, actually, you talked about eviction prevention. There were some numbers on there, but I just wanted to know if we had those numbers as like a function of percentage. I know we talked about how many people have been helped, but do we know how many people have been not helped, I guess, or didn't receive assistance?
So actually, I'm not going to share that, but I think because this is only kind of a part of the picture, Mike. It's showing what's been funded with community development. I'd have to get you different numbers on the larger scale. And we've actually just started, and I can send this out to the commission, an eviction dashboard that shows each month we're tracking the number of court cases and the actual the filings, and then how many of those were prevented, as well as how many were actually carried through. And I can send that out to the commission, which would provide a more accurate picture than the presentation I just gave.
Okay, awesome. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just, from my limited experience through COVID, but having a lot of conversations with staff and county board members, like one of the issues with the eviction stuff, Mike, and for the commission too, is like, there's just no really good way to get numbers. That the county really only knows about the people that it knows about. And of course, there's a great large number of folks who have basically what we call self-evicted that we don't know about. That's basically the great lift, is just not even knowing who, we know there's people out there that the county would like to help, and we don't know who they are. And, unless they kind of come to the county or they're in a system somewhere, that's the challenge, obviously. Anything else for Joel. We've got development updates, a couple other things in the agenda here. I want to make sure we get to that so it doesn't get too late here. But it sounds like there's going to be some more opportunities to provide input as this consolidated plan kind of finalizes in the spring. Okay. Well, thanks for the presentation, Joel. So next on the agenda here is what do we have here? Is it the development updates here? Yeah.
So this is Melissa Danowski with the Housing Division, and I can provide a brief overview of the development updates. I'll be going through highlighting just a couple projects, and the first project that I'm going to be highlighting is Park Shirlington. And if you bear with me for a second, I'm going to put up on the screen a map of the Park Shirlington property, just so everyone can see where it's located. And I did want to provide a little bit of context for housing commissioners that may not have been here back in 2017 when the original AHIF loan was approved by the county board. So if you'll just bear with me for a little bit as I provide some of that context, and then get into a targeted county board action for a loan extension that we're hoping to go to the board for in December. So on November 27, 2017, the county board approved a $6 million AHIF loan to Standard Foundation Park Shirlington, who is the applicant, and it's a joint venture between Standard Community and Foundation Housing. And that loan was to help finance the acquisition of Park Shirlington Apartments, which was a market rate affordable or MARC apartment complex built in 1954 and containing 294 units. And the apartment community is located in the Fairlington neighborhood. So as you can see, it's also bordered by 395, and Fort Reynolds Park is also proximate to the development. So when originally assisting with the AHIF loan, it was necessary to act quickly. The site was listed for sale on the open market, and there was risk of a market rate developer purchasing the property and providing no or limited affordability at the site. And the AHIF loan term was for 3 years. Essentially, this was a quick acquisition that would enable time for the long-term affordable housing strategy to be developed. And during the loan term, all the units are income and rent restricted to households earning up to 80% AMI. And during this time, the applicant has committed to working with the county to develop that long-term affordable housing plan for county board consideration. And it's anticipated additional county financing in the form of an AHIF loan will be requested by the applicant in support of that strategy. And the county's goals for the property include preserving at least all of the existing affordable housing, which is 294 units, through preservation or redevelopment, and ensuring implementation of a tenant relocation plan that would allow as many current tenants as possible to remain or return to the renovated and or redeveloped property. And in addition to the AHIF loan, the county has a right to exercise an option to purchase the southern parcel containing 105 units. The option is intended to further protect the county's interests in the property as a subordinate lender, and the right to exercise the option at a purchase price of about $28 million expires this January 31st, 2021. So in support of the affordable housing goals, the applicant has submitted a preliminary site plan which proposes adding an infill affordable building to the south parcel and preserving the existing units on the south parcel to equal that 294 affordable units that currently exist on the property. And they propose that the north parcel be developed with a mix of townhomes and a market rate multifamily building. Staff is currently reviewing their preliminary site plan proposal. And once review is completed, the applicant would submit a final site plan for review by county staff. And once that's accepted, a community process would begin, including what's called the Site Plan Review Committee process, or SPRC process. And staff will keep, and I'll keep the commission informed of when a final site plan is submitted and the community process begins and when there's input opportunities. This will also come back to the commission as an information and action item prior to site plan consideration by the county board. And then after site plan approval, financing negotiations and review of the financing strategy, including a AHIF loan request, would also come before the commission. And I want to know, and for the reason I wanted to make sure this was on development updates, was that staff did extend the term and option last May of the loan and the right to exercise the option to purchase the south parcel. But we need to extend it again in order to allow time to get through the review and community engagement of the site plan, and then to have time for public process and review of the financing. So staff, we are recommending the loan term be extended to May 2022. It currently expires this August. And we are recommending the right to exercise the option be extended to the earlier of a county board approved site plan or the end of the AHIF loan term. So it's hoped that with this action, no further extensions will be needed. As mentioned, we're targeting the December county board meeting for these extensions. I just want to pause, and if there's any questions, if not, I can go to the second project that I was hoping to highlight for development updates.
Yeah, Melissa, Holly's got a question.
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that, you know, this property owner was real big on the list at the beginning of this, the eviction thing. They had like 22, 23, 24 units that they were trying to evict tenants on. And then they, of course, when we caught them on it, they said it was a big mistake. So I would make sure that in your negotiations with them, you put something in there about evictions.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other thing I would say is that, you know, this is another important aspect of us working with the schools, because the school that you can see on the top left, Abingdon Elementary, is already full. So depending on what as they develop this site, depending on what they put in there is going to depend on whether, you know, how that elementary school is going to work, and whether or not they're going to end up busing kids from South Fairlington. So that's a important concept and idea to have on our plan for this year.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, unless Paul's got a question too, Melissa.
Yes.
Thanks. Melissa, what's the reasoning for the timing of the option to purchase expiring different or when it would terminate? Can you explain that, why it's the earlier of those 2 points?
Right. So, you know, the option to purchase was something that we were able to negotiate with the developer. It was definitely a tough negotiation. We're able to get that in there. And the reason that it would, we're proposing that it would expire the earlier of either an approved county board approved site plan or the end of the AF loan term is because once this project gets to the approval stage of the site plan by the county board, there will be certain conditions, I think, that will be placed on the property that would make us feel comfortable enough to know that this development would in fact move forward, and, you know, that we would be comfortable then being able to negotiate the Affordable Housing Investment Fund financing. And so we're comfortable with that expiration date. And if it doesn't get to board approval, or for some reason something goes wrong, then we would have that option to purchase all the way up until the end of the AHIF loan term, is what we're proposing.
Just to follow, so it is an option exercisable at the county's initiative rather than a right of first refusal? Is that right?
Correct. It's not a right of first refusal. It's an option. It's the right to exercise an option to purchase the southern parcel. So at any time, you know, between now and the either the earlier of the board approved site plan or the end of the AHIF loan term, the county would have the ability to exercise that option.
And what triggers that? I mean, is it just any point, or? What
triggers that is essentially county board desire to exercise it. So there's nothing other than, you know, in order to exercise it, we have to pay, I think it's a $540,000 deposit, and essentially notify the applicant that we will be exercising the option. You know, and it costs 28 million for the southern parcel. It contains 105 units. But otherwise, I don't think there's a particular trigger other than that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, why don't you just go ahead, Melissa? I think that's all of our questions for now.
Okay, thank you. And I will try to be very brief about the next one. The next thing I wanted to highlight was just that, and this will be an item next month, but we are hoping to come before you to talk about a Neighborhoods Form-Based Code transfer of development rights multiplier amendment. The Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code includes conservation areas, which are solely comprised of portions of Barcroft and Fillmore Gardens apartment complexes. There's about 1,500 units total in those conservation areas. And these properties are market rate affordable properties designated as conservation areas due to the affordability and historic preservation aspects of the developments. So transfer of development rights, or TDR, is a tool that could help preserve the affordability of the units in these areas. And to help facilitate the transfer, the county board adopted a multiplier that allows density eligible to transfer to a receiving site on Columbia Pike to equal 3 times the specified number of committed affordable housing units preserved at, you know, Barcroft or Fillmore sending sites. And if the receiving site is located elsewhere in the county, then 2 times the number of committed affordable housing units preserved at Barcroft or Fillmore could be sent or transferred. And the multipliers sunset December 31st, 2020, so the end of this month. And we are recommending reinstating the multipliers to keep TDR as an available option for affordable housing preservation at Barcroft and Fillmore Gardens properties. And, you know, this will be a full info item next month, so I can certainly provide more details. I just wanted to give the commission a heads up about that. And the one last thing I wanted to highlight was that there is a site plan that will come before the commission next month in January called the Ames site plan. And just a heads up that that will have an affordable housing contribution, and I'll be able to talk more about that next month. And that's all I had, but I think, unless there's any questions, I think Sarah had some updates as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Sarah has some updates in the Odyssey and maybe other things, but were there any other questions for Melissa? Well, if not, too bad. I'm just going to throw it to Sarah.
All right, thank you, Eric. So as a quick background, the Odyssey is a market rate site plan condominium project that was approved in 2001. It's in the courthouse area located at 2001 15th Street. The project was originally approved as a rental project and then became a condominium in advance of construction. However, the affordable housing contribution remained as 21 affordable units. There was a legal dispute over whether TB Venture, which is a subsidiary of Paradigm, had an obligation to maintain those 21 units as affordable housing. The county recently reached a settlement with TB Venture to sell the 21 designated affordable units at the Odyssey. The units will be sold over the next 3 years, and the county will receive a guaranteed minimum payment of $3 million from the sale of the units, with the potential to receive additional funds after all the units are sold and the total costs have been calculated. The $3 million will equate to between 30 and 42 AHIF funded affordable housing units. That's assuming around 85,000 to 100,000 a unit. And the affordability compliance period would be 60 to 75 years and a mix of income levels. So the settlement also provides that the 6 remaining households currently residing in the affordable units will be permitted to remain in their homes for 2 years, with an extension to the end of the school year for any households with children who attend Arlington County Public Schools. Tenants can relocate at any time that they wish and won't incur any lease break fees if they decide to relocate early. All of these remaining households will be eligible for relocation payment assistance regardless of when they decide to relocate and regardless of their current household income. And the amount of the relocation payment will be based on the number of bedrooms. In addition, tenant advisory services will be provided to tenants in identifying new housing opportunities in Arlington and nearby jurisdictions. Tenants will also be directed as appropriate to county agencies or programs, including rental assistance programs for those tenants who may be rent burdened when they move to a new unit. The way it will work is the site plan amendment will incorporate a progressive release of TB Venture and the Odyssey Condominium Association from the affordable housing condition as each Odyssey unit is sold. So we now have data on the 15 households that already chose to move from the Odyssey. And of those 15, 12 have moved into other committed affordable units in Arlington. 1 purchased a home, 1 moved into a condo in Arlington, and 1 moved into a market rate complex in Arlington. So with that gives an overview of the settlement that we reached after a very long time, and appreciate your patience and waiting until this day until I was able to disclose the specifics of the settlement.
Thanks, Sarah. Do folks have questions about this? I mean, this is this situation with the Odyssey has been going on for, is it 3 years, 2 years, at least 2 years. So, and for some background, basically the Odyssey was apartments, and then they converted into condos. It's a little unique of a situation, and the property changed hands, and folks basically started getting notices about 2 years ago. And that's kind of how it came to the attention of staff, and then it made its way to the Housing Commission. So this has been kind of a long time coming. So do folks have any questions or concerns they'd like to raise about this? I know I do, but I want to let other folks chime in. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I mean, if nobody else is going to speak up, I usually try to go last. But just to go over the numbers again, it's $3 million the county is going to be paid for how many units? It was 22?
21 current units. It's a minimum payment of $3 million. It's actually based on what the market rate sales prices end up at, and taking out the cost for rehabilitation and total costs for closing and whatnot. But so it's a minimum of $3 million.
I mean, that seems kind of on the low side to me, but I guess I'll just make that comment. I'm not sure that's only like $150,000 a unit. They should be a market price a lot more than that, no?
Sorry, I keep muting myself. Yes, the market price is higher than that, but we're backing out the cost to renovate the units and a couple of other things before getting to the amount that is given to the county, the portion of the sales proceeds.
Well, I mean, if nobody else has wants to weigh in, I mean, kind of calling Ann out. She's on the call here, so feel free, Ann, to chime in. Ann and I had a very nice conversation. Ann Venezia, who's our housing director, who's joined us on the call tonight. You don't have to speak though, but she very generously gave time yesterday, and I talked to her about this as well as some other things. And I did talk to Matt DiFerente, who's our county board liaison, likely next chair of the county board next year in 2021. And I conveyed my own personal thoughts, which, nice to see more money going to AHIF. That's good. And I'm glad to hear, Sarah, that basically a vast majority of the folks who kind of left on their own accord ended up making it into other kind of stable situations, the vast majority of them in CAFs. But, I just, and this really isn't about you, Sarah, and it's not really even about the housing division. I just kind of have a big problem with the way this all played out. I feel like the developer came in and was able to basically play the system around for a couple of years and was able to buy themselves out of the affordable housing commitment. And it really troubles me I don't think the county had this intention at all, but it does trouble me that the consequence of all this was that, about 3/4 of the families that were in those units in this building decided they had no choice but to leave, even though they weren't really legally obligated to do so. And we as a county had made a commitment that those units would be committed affordable, and we kind of left them hanging in the wind. And I just have a big problem with us kind of backing down on this. I think it doesn't speak well to the county's commitment to, committed affordable units and market rate buildings, which is something the county has pursued. I believe in personally, and it just really troubles me that we just kind of folded and we didn't uphold our commitments here. And I conveyed that to Ann and conveyed that to Matt, and I see this as a county board decision mostly, weighing of interests, and I bluntly told Matt that I felt like we abandoned these families by not pursuing this more aggressively. And I know that staff has talked about looking at the language and seeing if there are things that can be done, but I guess where I'm landing is ultimately, if we're going to make these commitments as a community, and we're making these deals where folks are promising, the developers are promising, the market rate ones, to have these committed affordable units, there needs to be the understanding that if there's an issue, the county will enforce them, even if legal action is required. And the county decided not to do that here. And so I just am very troubled. I don't know if other folks are in the same way, but I just really don't like the way this played out. Go ahead, Alice.
Thank you, Eric. We've been following this for over 2 years, as you said. So I'm really happy to hear that we know where these families landed, which we didn't know before. So I'm curious how 12 of them found a calf. That would be interesting to know. I did have some follow-up questions, and I felt like this is an opportunity for us to learn lessons, just as citizens in the community, as well as the different offices that were involved. So I would be interested in learning a little bit more, maybe next month or when we could. We hear that we're going to get $3 million or more back in the AHIF as sort of a payment or repayment. I wondered what the calculation is on what Paradigm actually got in the beginning for the density that they got in the initial agreement, the initial site plans. I'd like to know what that figure is versus the approximately $3 million we think we're going to get back. I also wondered about, what were any supports that those 15 households that have now departed received, because the saga of this is that multiple times throughout this period of time, these families received inaccurate information, ominous information, like all kinds of weird things that they received from different sources, confusing them and scaring them, and it sounded horrible. So I would like to know, I suggested to Ann or to someone, is there someone in DHS or somewhere where they're actually connecting with these 15 to check on them? Look, we know of one family, which is how I learned of the whole odyssey of the Odyssey in the beginning, that left and luckily landed in a calf, but the calf is too small for their family. They are scrunched in there, and they're off the metro line, and they don't have a vehicle. And so we don't know how they landed and if they landed well, or what their needs are, or, are they eligible for a housing grant and they may not know about that, or, what could we do to kind of approach these families and assess their situation with them and make sure they landed in a good spot and they have what they need or what could be provided to them. They obviously self-evicted, so that means they're not eligible, I suppose, now for any relocation costs they had. But, those kinds of things I think these families deserve, kind of a check-in and some sort of an offer of supports or maybe an assessment of their situation. So I'd like to know if that's feasible, and if it does occur, maybe we could get a report later on what was found to be the needs of those 15. So that comes to mind. I know they're looking at site plan language in, that sort of era of site plans that were negotiated in the early 2000s. I think that's really important that we follow up and make sure that there aren't other, I feel like in the last few years we've gotten, or the county, the staff, housing staff is so sophisticated now in how these are negotiated. But I think back there, and this was a much more nuanced and kind of odd situation. I just hope there aren't others where there's, these sort of loopholes that people can take advantage of, particularly non-mission driven organizations that may have on-site or nearby units that their goal is not to, stabilize and provide housing for low-income earners. So I think we need to make sure that's the case.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, and I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead, Sarah. I mean, you can just jump in. I'm sure you have some responses.
Yeah, I just wanted to correct one point. This really is an extremely unique set of circumstances, and there were a fair number of ambiguities related to this. But one distinction is Paradigm actually was not the developer of the site plan. Paradigm's role came in when they purchased these units to have them as affordable. I just wanted to make that one distinction.
I mean, I think that's fair, Sarah, but I guess where I would push back is that it's not really that uncommon for these properties to change hands, and it's not like I don't know that the market necessarily incentivizes conversion, but it's not like this couldn't happen again in the future, right? I mean, there could be more conversions where we have these covenants in place now.
So we've beefed up the language related to condominium conversions in the event that a project converts to condo after it starts off as rental. This one was unique in that it basically became condo before it even started construction. So it was a little bit of a different situation, and yet there were the affordable rental units that then were purchased to be affordable.
Go ahead, Paul.
It struck me what Sarah said that Paradigm bought these units in this condominium building after they were built, which, if anything, to me suggests that they're more culpable because they recognized an opportunity to buy units at below market and capitalize on that. So I would agree that it is regrettable, but I don't have anything more to offer, unfortunately, at this point.
I mean, I guess where I'm at, and I don't look, it's 9:40. We're going to wrap up soon here. I guess where I'm at is, the county certainly seems to have. I mean, the deal has been done. I mean, and the county certainly got things out of this deal that could benefit folks going forward. The money is always good, but it just really strikes me the wrong way that we kind of gave up on these families, and there are nuances, like Alice pointed out, that we deliberately wanted units in this building, and now we don't. There's extreme value. We talk about stuff in Roslyn, and we have fights about on-site and whatnot, but there's value, right? There's value in on-site right off the metro. So I think I would at the very least like to look, I don't think anything's really going to happen unless we make a stink of this. I think staff is looking at stuff, but I think this is one of those times where we as a commission need to kind of, in my view, kind of be a little bit of a pain and keep pressing the issue with the county board so that they don't just kind of be like, well, it was regrettable what happened, but it is what it is. I mean, this needs to not happen again. So I think at the very least, I think would be, reasonable for us to ask them, direct staff, to come back with some after action here in like 3 to 6 months. Like, what are we going to do comprehensively to make sure that we don't get, basically taken for a ride for a couple of years by a for-profit developer, like Paul said, who basically recognized an opportunity and then kind of was able to buy themselves out of these commitments. So that's my thought. Maybe we could put a letter together or something. I don't have anything right now, but that would be one way we could go about it. Anne, go ahead and feel free to chime in.
Sure, yes. Good evening, everyone. So, Eric, as you indicated, so I know we had a conversation yesterday. So, some of this I know you and I already discussed, but over the last few years, so I guess initially when the situation was brought to our attention, staff was consulted and did spend a lot of time trying to work with the attorneys to figure out different scenarios of how this might play out. So staff was consulted, housing staff was consulted on that, and really did spend a lot of time trying to think through not only the likely scenarios, but also just what the risks might be with the county potentially pursuing litigation and how that could play out. We won't know because that wasn't the path that the county chose. We won't know how that would have happened. But at the time, when the board was looking at, again, what the potential risks could be if that litigation was pursued, I mean, frankly, the risk was that the units could have been lost completely and the families might have been displaced immediately. And that was a risk that at the time, housing staff in particular, but we were very, very concerned about that risk. We wanted to make sure that that the families were taken care of and that they would have ample time to try to find other options. So again, we won't know because that wasn't the path the county took, how that situation would have played out. And Sarah certainly, was more involved in that process, so she can speak to it a little bit more. But I do want to make it clear to everyone who's tuning in that it was a very difficult, long decision-making process, and it wasn't taken lightly. And that the welfare of the families was really at the forefront for housing staff when we were consulted in terms of the direction that the county might take. So again, Eric, I know you and I talked through, and I know we're probably going to disagree on this a little bit, but I did want to share that with the rest of the commission as well, just some of that process that went into it. And again, Sarah, I don't know if you want to say any more about that.
No, I mean, you articulated it extremely well. It was a long, arduous process that we were involved with the county attorney's office, and there was a lot of analysis of the range of scenarios. And in the end, what was brought to the board was a range of scenarios, and we did not want to take the risk of going the litigation route and losing, and again losing everything and putting households out significantly sooner. So I just want you to know that was all taken very, very seriously and taken into consideration over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I guess where I don't really track though is that, and I don't like, I think we give each other the benefit of the doubt. Like, Anne's been great, and you've been great with communication, and really all the housing staff is. I don't doubt any of the sincerity or dedication. You guys are really great. But I guess where I just don't really understand is that might be the case, but like these people were displaced. I mean, they left. So I guess what am I missing? Like maybe they all landed in stable situations, or maybe they're less than ideal, but they're housed. But I understand what you're saying, but the net result of the county's approach here was that these families were left twisted in the wind for quite a long time. So while the county attorney's office and then you guys were weighing in from the housing standpoint, were contemplating stuff, life went on for 2 years. And so there is a fundamental problem with the approach that was taken, because these folks were left and they had to, like, I would have left too. I mean, I would have been like, I got to figure something else out. I don't know, like I'm facing all these issues. I'm getting these threatening letters, like whatever. So that I do kind of disagree. I don't think that approach was great, just because we know 3/4 of the families ultimately did leave on their own accord. So I guess that's where I would say, I think we need to reevaluate that. My sense is this is a structural issue between, we don't have an elected executive. We have county board members who have limited bandwidth. We have a housing staff. We have a county attorney's office. and it may be structural, and that nobody was really like the point person for this thing. But 2 years of this dragging along tells me that they knew what they were doing, and their goal was to drag this out. That's what my outside perspective is. That things kind of played out okay from the developer standpoint. So I've expressed this to the board. I mean, maybe Alice, go ahead, but maybe the next thing is I'll continue to talk to board members, but I think we really would like to see some after action on this, because I just think it's really important we uphold our commitments that we make to these families. Go ahead, Alice.
I know we're all ready to wrap up the meeting. I agree with so much of what you said, Eric. I do want to thank staff, because I know this was just difficult and strange, and there was so much they didn't even know because it was in the county attorney's office, and it's so much was hidden from that, and while they were in negotiations, so not an easy situation at all. And I feel like the result, setting aside what the families went through, the result after spilled milk is pretty good, and I really appreciate the housing staff and county attorney trying to negotiate the best they could in a difficult situation. I do not like that owner. He has done other things in the past, so this does not surprise me one bit. But I think from here going forward, I like what you're saying. I think we need an after action report. I think we've identified some areas that we have questions about, or I'm saying like lessons learned. How do we make sure that if something very difficult like this happens again, how do we approach a tenuous situation for families and not let 2 years of unknown go by for them, even during a time of negotiation? What could have been done better? What better coordination among the different county staff offices, things of that nature. So I think it's worth us putting together a list of questions or writing a letter or something so that we can avoid this ever happening again, and kind of lessons learned, and maybe some other things need to be put in place beyond the language we're talking about. I'm glad they're following up, but we do have a little list here from specific services to people up to structural interaction among staff that I think it's worth figuring out pointing out, figuring out what could be better, so we don't find ourselves in this situation for 21 households ever again. So
let's do this, because I don't really have anything to present for like a vote. So I think this is okay. So what I can do is I will send a generalized communication, probably just be an email, to the county board members. I'll probably copy Ann on it. And basically just convey some general concerns here that we've heard tonight, and then ask that they request that staff provide an after action report to the Housing Commission and to the board at some point in the near future, in the spring at some point, after they've had time to assess. This is already apparently effort. Ann has indicated that they're already looking at things, and so we're not necessarily asking staff to do anything new as far as evaluating. It's just more of a formalized report, so we can talk about it, and the county board can also have this. So unless anybody has problems with that, I will just go ahead and do that, and ask them to, ask staff to go ahead and do that. Okay, 9:50. Last thing on the agenda is, so thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. And Ann. So last thing on the agenda is subcommittees, which haven't really been active. That's something we're working on activating. So Alice, Tools and Trends is trying to get a meeting on the calendar soon for the Affordable Housing Master Plan review. Do you want to talk very briefly about that?
Sure. So yes, please mark your calendars for December the 17th at 7. And I'm hoping that as many of us as possible can be there. Staff will be helping us out with an overview of the Affordable Housing Master Plan document, the implementation framework that staff put together to, bring some of those goals to fruition, and then the monitoring plan. So that was 5 years ago, and part of the plan was to reevaluate every 5 years. So it's time for the reevaluation. And what I'd really like to encourage people to do is take a good look at that plan and those other documents before the 17th, so that we can have an informed presentation and discussion afterward. We're going to follow it up by monthly or bi-monthly meetings through the spring, kind of going through the different components of it and figuring out what evaluating it and putting forth recommendations for implementation of kind of updated goals or new foci, new priorities for the coming 5 years. So if we could be prepared on the 17th to launch that, that would be great. And I'll send out an email with some links of the documents that we need and a little sense of the scope and the calendar that we've gone over, that Joel and Russell have put together a really nice calendar. And Sarah and Laura have offered to assist with that. So we'll be taking responsibility for different parts, different meetings, different issue areas. So that'll all be coming out shortly. But I really hope we can all meet again on the 17th. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alice. Encourage everybody to go. That's for the newer folks, our subcommittees, that, pre-COVID, that has really been kind of where a lot of the work is really done. You can really, stretch out and really have these substantive discussions that you don't necessarily have the time for in these big meetings. I'm just going to, subcommittees have been kind of a mess with COVID. Are there any other subcommittee or liaison reports that folks may have? I think what we will want to do here in the new year is go through line by line of these subcommittees. We have some that are just vacant, and go through and make sure that we have folks on there, especially our newer folks, who can, those are the opportunities to kind of dig in a little deeper to some of these kind of micro policies. So we'll do that. But anyway, are there any other folks who have kind of reports on anything? The Highway, Crystal City Citizen Review Council, anything? Nope. Okay. So that's it, folks. A little before 10, we went on overtime. Thanks for your time. Everybody have happy holidays, happy New Year, stay safe, have a wonderful kind of holiday season, and be lookout for an email from me regarding the work plan. But otherwise, just keep reiterating, stay safe, and really looking forward to the new year and seeing you in January. So take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Eric. Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you to the staff.